Hi, Marcus.
Hi, Jane.
Welcome. I'm going to introduce you, and then I will give you an opportunity to add anything to that introduction if you'd like to.
Mm-hmm.
This is Markus Schnizer. He owns a Center for Body Awareness with about 20 years of experience in this work in Amsterdam. Marcus's style is a personal blend which pulls from the Grinberg method and TRE, which is tension and trauma releasing exercises. He also draws a lot in his work from his experience performing on stage as a dancer and actor. Spatial awareness, presence, and taking space. He's also well studied in the Alexander technique and is very influenced by that. He is a trained facilitator of circling and WeFlow. He teaches body awareness to film actors and also now teaches workshops in body awareness for practitioners in Amsterdam. So Marcus, can you talk a little bit about what the Center for Body Awareness is and how you came to that type of work in Amsterdam?
Hmm. Um, how did I come? I came to Amsterdam originally to study dance, and I was a professional dancer. And within that, I started late dancing, age 23, and I encountered many physical limitations. And it was actually Alexander technique which saved my career, and from there, approach and a way of working with the body, which really intrigued me, and I thought like I want to do something like that after my dance career. And when I started to look into that in the second half of my career, after 5, 6 years, I discovered other modalities which also were really beautiful. And for some reason, I was at that time very attracted to the Greenberg method. Not even sure yet if I want to become a professional practitioner, but just I love knowledge and I love experiential knowledge. So I inscribed for the first year for another year, and just got into it. And part of the training was, from the beginning on, after the first week, to work with clients. So you build up your flying hours, and that's what I did. And from, yeah, I did that from, yeah, I slipped into that from 2003 on, having clients, and more and more stopped dancing around in 2005, and then slowly progressed to more, to more body work. And there was a conflict with me and the Greenberg method organization. I felt limited in my freedom, and I thought it became more dogmatic. So I stepped out and looked for other modalities, and allowed myself to integrate these things and develop my own style. And yeah, here I am. I think that that's the short version of how I started bodywork in Amsterdam.
And what is the Greenberg method like? Not, it doesn't need to be super detailed, but just to get a sense of your yeah, your introduction to this world.
Greenberg method is a style of bodywork founded by Avi Greenberg, and what was, um, it was the first time that I had twice a session before I started to study, and it intrigued me enough to study it. And now looking backwards, is what he learned is really to use awareness to to your body, about fear, pain, shame, and these kind of things, and how it blocks us, or it limits us in patterns, and how to release these patterns. And it was there that I started to get this lens on of, hey, there's patterns and they're connected to the body, not only to the mind. And touch might be part of what might give access to the client, how to play with these patterns, and how to allow a change in the system.
And you mentioned coming up against physical limitations as a dancer. What were those?
Um, yeah, that's a good question. Overall, I was really stiff, and I was not accepted in a couple of European dance schools because of my age and specifically because of my stiffness, because I didn't train and whatever. And and I thought I can compensate a lot of these things with extra eagerness, which led to more injuries, especially in my knees. Um, and what I really, looking back now, what I was like, I tried to do. There was a lot. I have my share of childhood trauma, which created a lot of tension in my body, and I tried to overcome that tension with more force, which didn't really work sustainably. And it was Alexander technique which showed me, hey, if you actually let go, if you really let go, then your movement becomes soft. You will not have injuries, not like this kind of thing. So there was this limitations I ran into, and in the end, yeah, I some of the stuff I really could solve, and I became really soft. Some of stuff is like I learned. I had to learn that this is my body, and these are the limitations. And certain styles of dancing will be not. It's not for me, even if I would like to. They are not. It's, and then I become more like. When I started to accept that, I could more see my performance qualities, being on stage and being really present, and that actually being just present on stage is very often more intriguing for the audience than spectacular tricks, which of course I wanted also to do, but and I had my special sets of tricks, but it was, I mean, there were so many dancers out there which was so much better than me on that level. So.
Great. Okay, let's talk about your work now. So the word tension gets used a lot in hands-on work with clients. Muscle tension, fascia tension, maybe other kinds of tension too. This is a question that I love asking various people who come on this podcast. What is tension? How do you relate to that word or that concept?
Well, if it's come to that, definitely there are certain structures can be tensed. Uh, I like to look at states of body, mind, emotion system, and tension is a way of somehow a contraction or like alertness, activation in your nervous system. If you talk about nervous system, and it's a way of protecting. It somehow it's something in your system trying to create safety this way, um, protection, and very often it's learned by circumstances, by early childhood patterns, by traumas, whatever, to 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 use this contraction, this alertness, this kind of tension. And for me, the thing is like, can we find to explore if you, what happens if you let go that part, and do you feel safe enough still, and can you use tension, contraction, alertness more fluidly, going in and out according to what the situation needs. There
What
was a
are,
point when, yeah.
no, go ahead.
Now there was a point when I started to find out that I can release tension, that I can relax tension, that I can get more grounded. That I demanded from myself to do that all the time until I discovered it's quite naive from me and not sustainable to be all the time open and vulnerable and receiving. That there's many situations where that is where they would be, yeah, very harmful to myself and to my system.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about what I've read about wild animals just moving in and out of like sympathetic, parasympathetic all day as appropriate, you know, just alternating fluidly between the two. Um, what are things that you do to help your clients feel more safe? You mentioned safety in releasing tension.
Well, this is something I like that question because it was something I throughout my work that I became one of my learning paths is that actually many of the things I did learn in the beginning on the style of practice were not safe or not safe to everybody in every moment. So what really for me constitutes safety nowadays is attunement, seeing what is there and giving that, like, where is the client, if does he feel overwhelmed or not, and giving things in a kind of freedom, like, hey, are you like my most of my wording is invitations, suggestions, in this kind of style, not too much like you have to do this or that, or but it's like I think 90% of the times there's like a constant like offering and checking for agreement or not, and that became more and more like my style of working, which I wasn't in the beginning. The way how I learned my first body work was like the client needs to undress in his underwear and lay on the table, and then and then slowly I found out, hey, not everybody feels comfortable laying in his underwear. And it's already, and then I found out that actually laying on your back already feels very exposed for some people. It's already too much to lay simply with the front open to the world. And I couldn't imagine that because it wasn't my point of reference. But it was like learning by observation and by feedback of people, like what is more effective and why a certain process is not happening. Yeah, and so I think in general for me safety is a lot about empowering the client to at every moment to check boundaries, to check what is alive in them, and giving the freedom to interact. So in this sense, a session nowadays, in back in the days, was much more a treatment. I do something to a client, so he's more. Nowadays, I see it more as a mutual learning process, and I'm so really willing and open for clients participation and bringing in what is alive in them, and see whether that in which way that gives me information what might be the good thing to follow through.
Yeah, so does that mean that sometimes you would work with people on a table, other times there would be movement involved?
Yeah, absolutely. Many sessions are on a table, on a massage table, but there's also sessions where we just sit in the space and we exploring what is happening in a class, more like a circling style thing, like what is happening, and from there giving suggestions, hey, and if you would do now this, and or if I enter a bit closer to your space, what is changing in your experience, and what, and then like I noticed that you put down your eyes when I come closer and you try to push me away. How would it be to push me away with your eyes, having eye contact with me, and really mean also with your eyes to push me away? And I remember a session where a client chose to sit on one corner of my space in the corner, and from there share the experience, and she exploring how it is to be present with me, and me just being present, and following her suggestions where she wanted to put me. So she she could explore her sense of boundary and safety in that.
Amazing. Yeah, so it sounds like you have a big toolbox that you pull from, and there's all these different ways the sessions can look. Let's say somebody is coming in for a first session. What would a typical first session look like where you're kind of defining that format based on your client's needs?
Yeah. My usual format for that is that I schedule a 2 hour appointment. Normally a session with me is 1 hour, like a follow-up session. Intake is 2 hours, and the first hour is dedicated, or the first 5 quarters even, often in reality, is really just a conversation. And it's for me to get known to the client, what information share. I usually, my first question is, how can I serve you? And from there, or what brought you here? What are you expecting to get out of this? And from there, often just listening and asking information about family background, about also a part is medical history. Just to be sure to, having contraindications or things to be aware of, medicaments, medicines, these kind of things, pregnancies, fractures, accidents, chronic diseases, anything, sleep and food patterns, and so from that I have a certain list where I work myself through to be sure to cover all the things. But the question which interests me most is, how does your day look like? What are you happy to do? What makes you happy in life? Because the way how I look at clients is they are persons with qualities, and they have a unique set of qualities, and they use this all their life to come up to this point where they come to me. So there's something in them is strong and surviving, otherwise they wouldn't come to me. And how can we use these qualities in a more efficient way, because usually the patterns they developed right now somehow creates a stuckness on a physical level, on an emotional level, on a psychological level. Somehow they're stuck, otherwise they wouldn't come to me. There's these rare cases which just come out of curiosity, but then that's the quality we can work with. So anyway, so I'm trying to define in the intake sessions what is this quality in you, and how it's maybe overused right now, or used in an inefficient way, and how can we open up the patterns and finding variations whilst appreciating and honoring what this pattern brought to you in your life as well. So I don't want to replace one pattern by another one. I want it to be accessible for you, but maybe less often accessed in your day-to-day life. And usually my last question in the intake is, or one of the last question is, if you would be in front of a fairy now, like a fairy from fairy tales, instead of in front of me, what would be the wish you would ask this fairy concerning your own life? Because it shows somehow the happiest dream of that person, what it would like to achieve, and somehow it gives this intrinsic motivation what the person is drawn to. And very often it's already a bit in line with what we discussed before, but it gives very often another insight, like, oh, this is really something I would want, or things. So, and even the process of formulating this question until it seems to fit to this very moment is very beautiful to watch and to explore, and I gain a lot of verbal and non-verbal information from that because you see if people become more alive and excited or things like this. Yeah.
Are there any patterns that are common in people that come to you?
Yeah, yes and no. Um, I think some of the patterns are many of the patterns are universal. So it's um, fear, shame, uh, trying to stay in control, having a sense of control, um, making a feeling of not being good enough, having to do an effort to deserve a place in the world. That would be like more emotional and psychological patterns, and very often the clients come with signs of exhaustion or like burnout stuff. I've seen this a lot. Um, Quite some with some kind of abuse, sexual abuse or emotional abuse, neglecting. I don't. This is the interesting thing for me is like the. It's also. It reminds me of a question which in the preparation you gave me is every time I make a personal step in my personal development or spiritual development or however you want to call it, usually it immediately applies with the next clients coming. It's like there was my personal trauma from, as an example, I grew up very Catholic with very repressed sexual things, and the kind of information I got was men are all pig, women are just victims of male lust and sexuality. And my conclusion was I never want a woman to feel unsafe because of my sexuality. And when I worked with that, and that was actually a thing which came up within in my circling training, in my things, and I became so aware of my pattern, of like I'm holding all the time back, and in the contact with women. When I got more freedom and liberation in that this constant holding back stops, I discovered two things. First of all, what happens is not that every woman feels victimized. I mean, I knew it, but it's another on an experience level. It's like, hey, I can experience people another way. And the second thing which really threw me off was that suddenly, straight out of that, three women came and in the intake said, I want to work with my sexuality with you. I was like, hey. So apparently, like, there's like this reflection of my own processes and what I'm able to give to clients. And every time I make a step, this pattern seems to be emerging in the process with clients.
Hmm. What are the physical body structures that you're targeting with your touch? Muscles, fascia, organs, bones?
Yeah. I I look a lot. The way how I look at a client when I start to touch is somehow the whole system in a way, and states a person can be emotional, physical, states of body, mind, and so and there's a kind of awareness that wherever I touch, it probably impacts the whole system. And it gives me a lot of freedom in a way to like in a way like where to start and where to go. So I do look a lot. I touch a lot muscle and fascia. Definitely, it's also I consider it very often a very safe way of starting with people. But I do also start organs. I touch organs. I touch bones as a very specific way of clients becoming aware of the bony structure inside. It's a very unique way of grounding and dropping out of effort. I use sometimes just awareness, like having a hand above a region, and so the client senses the presence of a hand rather than having me really touching on it. Yeah, so there's no like the only really no go for me is really genitals. I think if a client would ask me specifically to touch them there, I would first have first put like a framework. What is the aim of that, and what is? I could imagine if somebody would ask me, for example, deep scar tissue work after I don't know, operation or delivery, that I would be open to do that. And at the same time, I think there's people who are really trained in that and better. But otherwise than that, I think I touch really all structures. Yeah, inside mouth, ears, around the eyes. Yeah, bones, many bones, many connection between the like how they called in English, the tendons, the connection between the bone and the muscle, like this kind of fibric tissue. I touch as well, and I look. In general, I look much more like, oh, what is the impact on the system, and where does it move, and where does it start to release, and where's the flow going, and where does the flow stop. So very often I start, for example, in the neck or the shoulders, and I invite to breathe there, to bring the presence there, and from there I see, oh yeah, the diaphragm, the belly starts to move, but not completely, so I might go move to the belly, and then I see that somehow the energy gets stuck in the hips, so I might ask if it's okay that I put my hands on the hips and the groins. So it's I don't think too much about specific structures, like in terms of a muscle or whatever. I'm going more like, oh yeah, there's this layer, and then I want to reach off of that.
And throughout the session, you're kind of following a flow.
Yeah, good question. In the end, I looking a kind of a flow, a kind of release, a kind of a sense of surrender of the client to allow to be with what is present. Yeah, that.
I don't
Many
know. Go ahead.
ultimately, many patterns. As at the core, it is that we learned as a kid to not allow a certain intensity, and we developed a coping mechanism to downregulate this kind of intensity. And so a lot is teaching the client how can you allow a bit more of this kind of intensity, intensity of a fear, the intensity of a shame, the intensity of a pain, the intensity of an anger being really present in you.
Ooh, that's really interesting to me. I think a lot about what I'm doing in my process is always expanding my capacity, or I also think of it like as an aperture or something like that. And I have all of these things that I do internally that, like, I would call them really subtle moves that I do that are always kind of finding that edge and trying to open it wider. But I find it very hard to talk about communicate with people about how to find that in their own process. And I'm curious, besides inviting people to feel more fear or feel more anger, are there any ways that you communicate with people, or is it just that your presence kind of offers that to people?
No, no, I look what is the what how does this state, this pattern looks to me right now. And I had a client, for example, who was very trained in meditation. And when I touched that very client in a way which triggered a pain sensation, I could see that or my impression was, I usually share my impressions or the impact on me. The impression there was like, hey, it's painful, and she said yes, it's painful, and she immediately went into a style of, can I be with the pain in a silence way, and can I transform the pain? And it was like automatic. It was such a trained muscle in that client that she immediately tried to transform, and then it's like, and that's what I observe, and then it's like, no, hey, but how would it be to acknowledge the pain in a different way, in a more, not in this internalized way, but in a more externalized way, right? And how would it be to really use your voice and maybe allow your body to move or to contract, because all of this was not happening in this moment with pain. So there was my looking for a variation. And in this moment, this client who was like a person who did lots of spiritual work and a lot of developed work, she accessed a different way in her nervous system, in her state, and started to use sound at first very reluctant and things, because her system was not used to that. And then I was like, hey, we can do it also as a playfulness. If the pain is 10, you scream loud. If it's pain is 5, you scream a bit less. So and from there, suddenly the flow happened, because her usual way stopped, and she got access to another layer of experience of her pain than what she was usually known to. If somebody is very expressive all the time about the pain, almost like more like drama queen or whatever, then I would probably that client to invite, hey, how would it be to be more silent and more internal, and can you be with the intensity without all the time moving and without. So I'm usually look what is there, what is the style, and what would be the variation on that style.
Nice. It's really nice that people can scream in your space.
Yeah, I'm very lucky with patient neighbors. In my, I do invite, for me also the throat, because you asked before about structures. For me, the throat is one of the key places I'm looking. What is happening there, because it's a place where the breathing goes through, the voice is going through, the food is going through, and it's a place where we can interfere with our consciousness directly. Like we can make choices around how we breathe. We can make choices about using our voice, and there's many cultural patterns about the throat and the voice and the breathing. So it's a very rich area of starting to interact in the context of body learning.
So you might you might prompt people with breath stuff or with vocal expression to explore the throat.
Yeah, but both of it. It's
Yeah.
like it's really like um, I read a lot. I picked up a lot of information like in a kind of kaleidoscopic patchwork style, and I from there I form personal working hypothesis about from what I saw in and they're like, hey, if this is like this, how this do? So and that I bring then to clients, and most of this working hypothesis somehow show up effective. Maybe they're not completely correctly in a scientific sense, but they are useful tools in my way. And in my workshops, when I'm teaching now other practitioners, I also introduce them as my personal working hypothesis without any scientific background, but as a kind of a model which might be and should be tested on application whether it works or not. And throat, yeah, it's a very rich thing. And there's like, if people go into a freeze, it blocks their voice. I mean, if you're in a freeze and you try to be invisible, then using your voice is naturally switched off. So asking them to play with the voice, trying to find back the voice, is already a doorway into coming out of a freeze state, for example.
You mentioned tendons when you were talking about structures. I don't know much about working with tendons. Is there anything notable or unusual about tendons versus muscles, for example?
Well, my first thing what comes up is why you don't explore yourself and start to look in your own body tendons, and what if you will touch more the tendons than the muscle, um, uh, well, tendons also can be tight and they can loosen up, and there's a lot of sensoric thing, a lot of the proprioceptive stuff and interoception is in the tendons, and giving touch to it, and loosening up the structures, and also giving in a way information to the body about itself by touching it creates a lot of change already. Um, that's what I can say about the tendon stuff. Like there's like and from what I saw in a book about trigger points, several trigger points are actually more on the tendon than anywhere else.
Okay. You also said something about the skeletal system, something about encouraging people's awareness there and that helping them. I can't remember exactly what you said, like dropping
Yeah.
some layer of effort. Can you say
Yeah.
more about
Well, what I talking in terms of states, my personal working hypothesis, or how I use it is muscles and tendons and nervous system can be active or tensed or less active and relaxed or whatever. Bones are just bones. Bones are. They don't do anything. They cannot be tensed. They can be broken at times, but otherwise bones just are. So dropping into awareness of your bones brings you to a kind of state where you can feel that and becoming aware of how it forms structure in your body. And I see you already starting to exploring it. Can bring you in a place of effortlessness being, and therefore a kind of groundedness of presence, where you don't do an effort. No, you just are, because bones are just are, and they create structure without any effort. And with another body worker, we were exploring these two different states where bones are the structure where all the other stuff is hanging on, like the muscle and the tendons are hanging on the bones, and the muscle is moving the bones, but actually they are supporting the things, versus the experience of the bones are actually embedded in all in this other tissue. They are deep down and in, and how is my experience changing whether I feel my bones embedded versus being the structure where all the other tissues are hanging on. And it's fun. It really changes your experience. And I very often, very regularly touch the forehead skull or the back part of skull, but especially the forehead. So people very often this region here, people are aware of the place of thought, and really making people aware that there's like a physical structure, the skull, which is just a skull, and being present of the place not as the place of thought but as a physical structure. Yeah, yeah, you had a glimpse already of that, just dropping it. It's like, oh yeah, I can change my perception about myself this way.
Is it hard for anybody to find that awareness of their skeletal system?
What usually happens, the first thing is when they start to work on bones, is that people go in a kind of trance state, like a semi sleep state, which because the whole system slows so much down, like, and I call it the integration mode. So and that's also something I learned throughout the years, to trust that place. You know, that awareness is not always means that you are aware with your cognitive brain being able to describe. That awareness of states also means like, oh yeah, I'm going in this dream state where I cannot, like something in my body is happening and my consciousness is somehow fading a bit more out, and trusting that this is also a useful state to be. Actually, I think it's a very important state of integrating and recovering.
Cool. So my next question comes from a friend of mine, and this is the person that I know of you from. I have not gotten work from you. I hope to someday, but I know of you because a friend of mine went to do a session with you and texted me afterward to like rave about it, and I really trust her like taste in in body work, and she, when she texted me about it, something that she said, the way she described it was that it's like releasing stuff at the absolute deepest level. And so I wanna talk to you a little bit about what that's like on your end. You and I were chatting a little bit before we started recording, and you mentioned something about like the role of the witness, the way that you are in your work when you're witnessing people or receiving people. I think of it sometimes as like listening with your full body, your full being. What is it? How do you experience people's bodies, their systems? What's your internal experience like of receiving somebody's body that you're working with?
Yeah, the words which come up first is I really try to be in the other person's world, and really, and it's very different with different clients. I and there's really clients where I don't know where they are exactly, or it's very shallow guessing where it is. And there's other clients I can literally read the thoughts. I can perceive everything on every level of their, on almost every level, and that's part of what I learned as well, is to give it back to clients as a like as my experience, as my assumption about the experience. And some of them are almost scared how exact and how precise it is. And for many clients, it's also helpful to actually feel themselves better, to have like this, my external experience, and giving that back explicitly about themselves. And one of the mysteries of me is, and I'm still, I started to accept it and not seeing it as a personal failure, but as a more like a dynamic within clients. There's clients where this there is incredible synchronous, and there's clients where it doesn't work. And I couldn't find out yet what are the parameters, which clients there is this easy reading happening, and what are the characteristic of parameters of a client where I can't read and I can't completely access. Um, you asked me about my inner experience. The best description, and probably this sounds very vague, is that like I felt imaginary kind of organ, hand slash finger, is tracking inside the person what is happening, and like and getting like, it's not really images in the sense that I see them, but it's like a sensation in me, like, hey, now something is happening in your hips. Now your uterus is contracting. Now you're thinking about your grandmother. Now it's like impressions I get when, yeah, looking is part of it, but it feels more like an internal looking uh, to that place. It's like, it's more like a question I ask myself, hey, I wonder what is happening there, or I wonder how that is feeling now. Um, and very often it's very clear to me, with most of the clients, or the ones I come back, and with some clients it's not. It's like I cannot track or trace them.
Yeah, I
I'm
love,
not sure if that answers the question.
yeah, I think so. I think there's probably more we can get into, but I love the way that it sounds like circling is so important in your process. But I'm kind of wondering how much of the session you would spend talking with people versus when would you drop in and stay in silence together?
You mean like in a regular session when working on a table or something? Um, I think there's somewhere between 20 and 80% is talking, or is also involving talking with the touch. Uh, Either describing uh, experiences, or asking about, or me describing, or the client asking for what is happening, what is changing, what is sensation, like trying to verbalize the experience, and the awareness and the change. Um, there's moments where I go more to autopilot, and my hands are doing things, and I'm actually thinking about my shopping list or something, and I was like, oops. Uh, so I can use also myself to redirect into to the present moment by what's your experience. So I'm like reattune myself to the person. I'm always, yeah, noticing my capacity of being present can vary between, I don't know, 50 to 100%. And in the beginning, again, I blamed myself for not being 100% present all the time, and now I'm more playful and forgiving towards myself. That's part of the process. Um, and then, okay, try to redirect myself to that thing. So in terms of talking, there's quite some talking involved as a way of keeping the growing the awareness of what is happening.
Mhm, mhm. And then you mentioned a lot of the sensations and intuitions, I would describe them, that you're getting, like about, oh, something's happening in the hips. Would you feel that in your hips, or is it a more general sense than that?
Now, many people ask me, it's a kind of imagination in the other person's body. It's like if I if it would be like if we would be now a couple of minutes together, I could tune into it, and then I could suddenly get a kind of emanation of, hey, I imagine something in your diaphragm is happening or whatever, and or it's like, it's not that I feel it in myself too much. It's not that's not how I usually describe my experience. I really see it more happening or experiencing in the other person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I imagine that's grown over the years that you've been working. Was it something that you always kind of had?
I think so. I think so that and I think that was part of my traumatic experiences, that I did not know what to do with this sensitivity, feeling the fear of other people and not being guided in that. And I remember that the first time I noticed that I really could track people was giving a fellow dance student a massage. I loved, in a way, like, since my early childhood, I loved touching people, and it felt like a good distortion of my sexual desires, being allowed to touch other people by giving them massages. And no, but I'm making now somehow a story, a narrative. Actually, I just enjoyed also touching, and there was this other aspect. But I remember in dance school, when I was 23 or whatever, giving a fellow student a foot massage and starting to describe what I imagine she's experienced in this moment, from moment to moment. Like, really, I was touching her heel and say, yeah, here it's a bit more painful, here it's a bit more soft, here it's very enjoyable, here you have a kind of pain. And if I go around, you really enjoy actually when I wrap it around, like a wrap around the heel. I really, now I get a very vivid memory of that thing. And she was like, this is so amazing. It's like, you are so accurate. And it was the first time that I saw, oh yeah, apparently I can really sense into people's experiences on the millimeter.
Mm.
So there was in 92, and I started my bodywork training in 2003 or something. So there was so I think it's, but honestly, I think it's highly developed and trained in me. I'm really convinced that this is present in everybody. Like musicality or something. Many people ask me, "Hey, how you have it?" I said, it's like this. I think everybody can do this. I mean, not on a professional level, but most of the people enjoy music. Most of the people can hum music, whatever. Musicality is a human thing, and I think this kind of sensitivity, being inside or containing the other person or something, I think it's a way actually how kids learn the first few years from the parents or the environment, and it's just well trained and well developed in my case.
Yeah, I agree. It feels very foundational to human connection to me, or something.
If I talk too much, feel free to cut me, yeah?
No, it's great. So this is another question from my friend who has received work from you. How does consciously triggering pain help to release it? And what are the conditions that allow for that to happen?
I think I partly answered that already beforehand. In a way, it's for me, it's not about the pain. For me, it's about the pattern around pain. So when I touch a structure, for example, usually that structure, like when I explore and I find the structure which is tensed or contracted or somehow out of balance in some way. Sometimes it's my sense of that something feels a bit swollen and there's too much liquid kind of style or whatever, but it feels out of balance. My assumption is that there's something around the pattern, and that's why it's holding on to this, or it's used in this style, and touching that place is painful because it's out of balance, not because I create pain. And when I touch it and it triggers pain, usually people put up the coping mechanism around pain. And then I start to explore, and usually it's holding breath, or try to overcome it, or to try to be strong, or try to move away from the place of pain, or like there's like the whatever personal style people develop around pain patterns. And then I stay there and try to make them aware, like, hey, this and this is happening, or this is happening. You're holding your breath. It looks like you lock your voice. You try not to use your voice. Everything is stiffening. Can you do this? And maybe even invite them, can you do it a bit more? So you become more aware of your style. And from there, then I suggest, okay, what happens if you start to let go this pattern? For example, breathe more, use your voice, start to move, become angry towards me because I'm creating the pain, or whatever, I don't know, whatever comes. But we're looking then for a variation of what was there before. And usually that enables a switch in the state, and enables the structure, and not only that structure, but the whole body to start like, oof, I'm going to another state, and most of the time it goes in a style of allowing something and the surrender to the intensity of what is there. And depending on what structure is, when the muscles let go, usually they become soft, and they are very soft, and they're not painful anymore. And they keep pressing the same or even harder, but because there's not the resistance anymore towards the kind of protective tissue, the protection is gone. Usually it's not painful anymore. That's not completely true for belly or stuff, or like deep fascia structures or organs. Then letting go might even create a kind of more intense pain, or a different kind of pain, but still they can be with it. I think there was another part of the question. What was the the second part of the question?
What are the conditions that allow for that to happen? I mean, I think we've touched on it partially with the creating a safe environment and being so verbally connected.
Yeah, it's this. It's not. I really consider. People often say like, "Wow, what you do?" I say, actually, I do nothing. I just provide a space of learning. The client does. It's really this. It's really the client creates the change. It's not me.
Yeah, you have this on your website. I show you some doors, but you have to walk through it.
Yeah. I mean, your website is quite old. I need to update it, but it's still very true for me. It's like, hey, it's your choice which doors you walk through. And this is and that's why I consider body learning and creating a learning kind of context rather than a treatment where I fix you. I'm not very attracted by fixing people, because usually then they come back. If they learn something, they get a choice. And talking about what are the parameters of creating it, learning starts when it becomes challenging. So you can get out of your comfort zone, because if you're in your comfort zone, usually there's not too much learning. There's like repeating what you know already. So I want to create a kind of setting and the experience where people are challenged, and not overwhelmed. Because when they're overwhelmed, there's no learning, there's just surviving.
Yeah.
So it's the clients and mine responsibility, both of us, to keep it in the sweet spot of challenging experience, not overwhelming and not boring.
Yeah. There's something coming through for me about like I'm kind of imagining your physical space in my head, and it's like a safe space to really explore pain of different types, which might sound straightforward or something, but I think that actually it's very hard to be a facilitator who can, I think it takes an immense amount of like your own work to get to a point where you can really hold space for people's pain effectively, pain of all kinds.
I'm not sure where's the question in that.
Not really a question, just what
Yeah,
I'm like, what
yeah.
I'm, what I'm,
No, yeah, I agree. I agree. My own capacity to be with people's pains is the limit of what the client can allow.
do you have any specific advice for finding that window between challenging and overwhelm and staying there?
Well, there's indications of what you would consider overwhelm. When you start to disassociate, when you start to numb out, um, um, yeah, it's an interesting question. It's this kind of signals where I'm looking for. It's like, but there's also people who their pattern is I have to be strong. So for them, it's already a place where they actually start from a place of numbness, or at least ignorance, and. Uh, and it's interesting for some people when they try to be good clients. There's a certain type of clients who try to be good clients and think they have to suffer through everything, even if we explicitly agreed it's not the part that actually they come out like, actually this was too much now for me, and I'm like, okay, great, this is your first learning, that you start to feel your boundaries, and I'm not happy that this happened, but I'm like, I would prefer that it doesn't need to be in that style. Um, and what I said, in my own learning, I became more aware of that like, in my wording, the way how I present things, are becoming more like, for example, when people ask me how do I lay down, I like to work on the skin because I'm a body worker on being on the skin. But what I really learned throughout the last the 10 years, was like, it's much more important that you feel safe and not distracted by your nudity or non-nudity, by what you have on or not. So please, more than what is important for me, it's important what is important for you. So when we will can find always an arrangement, like putting an extra sheet on top of it, or allowing my hand under the shirt, on the belly or something, where, or I can work on the shirt, or like we find out a way which feels non-destructive or overwhelming in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love what you said about like even laying on your back is a lot for some people. Like I think when I couldn't even sleep on my back for a long time because of that reason. Like I always slept on curled up on my side. Um, and that's not even with anyone else there. I'm intrigued by this overlap between the worlds of somatics, dance, and theater because I noticed it so much. I'm always paying attention to people in somatics that I think are doing interesting work, and I often notice that they either have a background in dance or theater. So I'm
Mm.
curious how your background in dance and acting, does it feel relevant to what you do now?
Yeah, in many ways. Well, it was first like being a dancer, which was my first way of being. I didn't share that part before I became a dancer. I was a whiz kid in school. I came straight after the gymnasium, straight out of high school, working in a computer company as a computer programmer, and I studied technical physics as a background. And around the same time when I did my final exams in high school, I was like, wow, dancing is really cool, but I'm too old to start with it. Oh, I should have been 10 or 11 doing this cover, this love. And when I was 19, I started to do dance classes, and then and with 20 more and more, and it became like this intrinsic, like, wow, I really love this. I need to do this more. And I used a lot of the money I earned in my computer side job next to studying. I used for paying dance classes, and it became so big that I said I really want to study this deeply. And then I moved to Amsterdam, or I looked for several schools. And even then, I wasn't convinced, or I told myself I'm not sure if I want to become a dancer, but I want to learn it better. Um, there was a bit little side pass, but so there was like this sense of I want to experience myself in a bodily way and in a movement way, which really brought me to this thing. And what I mentioned already, Alexander technique, then helped me to realize what that. Um, well, there were several dance schools which refused me because they said I'm too stiff and there's nothing you can do about it. And I believed them for these teachers because they are teachers for 20 years in a professional school. They must know. So if they tell me I'm too stiff for this thing, I can then who am I to doubt that? And and then start to find out that it's not true, and that they couldn't teach me how to let go, but other people were able to show me how to let go, and that brought me into this place. So actually, there's maybe much more choice than what I thought there is. And then I started to explore more of these things. I dived also in a bit in martial arts, in Tai Chi and Aikido, and there's a lot of philosophical background in that kind of movement arts around things. So, and then a lot of what it means to be on stage, the kind of using your presence, using spatial awareness, using connection to the audience, using vulnerability. I was very often, I think one of my best performance quality was that I could be really like transparent and really very vulnerable, and people would I had people in the audience who started to cry just seeing me without knowing exactly what is happening, and I didn't understand as well. Only later I understood that I allowed myself to be vulnerable on stage, which I didn't allow myself in real life, but on stage it felt safe behind the role to show parts of me which really touch people, and that brought me to this quest on the long run. Not in the first hand with body work, but later on when I started to work with actors, when I was invited to be a teacher in an acting school. Is like, hey, where's this place of vulnerability where you can allow yourself to use your demons for very authentic play and very in the moment thing. And um, I did for many years a course which was called Working with Obstacles, and the line was face your demons. It was like it became like a line which I used a lot with my students, and they knew it as well. It was like, can you be with this place and allow other people to see you in this place? And many of my students had the best ever performance when we filmed this, and many didn't. They couldn't do it yet, or the course was too short, or it was too scary, or whatever. But many of the people had the absolute highlight in their school career in this block, and that really intrigued me, and and showed me also it's this place of freedom where we can be vulnerable if we want to be. So it did, and a practical way, like being a performer, you need to be mindfulness. You know, to really, you need to be in the presence, and you need to be able to use your imagination and to embody your imagination, to be somebody else, not only from a conceptual point of view, but in as much as possible in any cell of your body, whilst you're aware that you're not that person. You inhabit that another person. So, if that makes sense.
Yeah, do you find the talk about vulnerability, I'm wondering, do you feel that you can be vulnerable in your work now?
am. I'm absolutely vulnerable. Um, and I think there's the deeper purpose for me. Why I still like this work and why I explore, apart from curiosity and learning new things. It's it's this place of feeling this kind of openness and vulnerable connection.
Yeah, what you said before about it feeling less like you're giving a treatment to somebody and more like you're I don't remember what you said. I was thinking of it as a dance when you were describing it earlier. But so
It
that's
is it's a it's a exploration in togetherness, a learning experience together,
right.
and it's a mutual learning process. It really is. I learned so much about myself with my clients, and I have the privilege to get paid for that. How beautiful is that? You know, like do to learn from the other people, to learn about life, to learn about connection. Yeah, it's really um, yeah, not tiring. It's really, it's a how you say, vigorating or something. I don't know if I use this word now correctly, but it really rejuvenates me. It really chooses me, and I usually have I work, or the last years I work often, and when I work with clients I work 11 hours in a row, like and like 8 clients with still always just a quarter in between. I do intermediate fasting on these days. I only eat in the evening after I finish, and usually I come out uh, satisfied,
That's
energized, and
cool.
energized, and like, I mean, I have a full day work. I'm not like, yeah, well, of course, yes, but I'm not um, like broken or whatever, and whatever. I usually come out like, yeah, wow. I had usually, yeah. I really measure, and uh, I do feel that this one, becoming older, that they're gonna slow down a bit. But for me, it doesn't feel like work anymore. So much like I need to work. No, we're creating a learning experience for you. Can you be with pain? Can you be with fear? And usually when the client opens up their vulnerability, or and finding access to this freedom, my system opens up with them. I'm like, wow. So yeah. Do I find vulnerability? Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm curious about WeFlow. When I was looking at some of the modalities listed on your site, this is the one
Yeah.
that it seemed the least obvious to me how it applies to your work. Could you talk a little bit about what WeFlow is and how it plays into your work?
Yeah, it's funny. How it works more. Well, WeFlow is a practice which you can use in daily life, at work, in your business, in solo, in group. You know, it's like it's a practice I encountered on Circling Festival. The main originator. His name is Stéphane Segadori, a Frenchman living in Amsterdam. He originally, I think he comes from business consulting, but he also had a lot of practice in awareness training and integral theory and all kind of things. And what I really learned from WeFlow is creating like a space, a we space together of mutual learning and dropping effort, being playful, um, giving freedom. I learned a lot of awareness tools in it, like not body work tools, but more from Buddhism coming, or I don't know where they are all drawn off. I did not track and trace them, but this concept of seeing yourself and others limitless, for example, is one of the things. Whenever I feel like I'm doing too much effort, or a client, there's a problem with the client. Hey, if I think there's a problem, I don't see him limitless. What is happening here? And usually, when I cannot see him limitless, usually I can't see myself limitless. So, where do I feel limited right now? It's this. And then I can drop. I can see the potential and the qualities of the client again a bit bigger. So what WeFlows, it has a very intentional culture. So you put intentions out and you work on them, and it really tries to bring yourself and other into flow, and to empower yourself and others. In WeFlow, there's not practitioner, but there's stewards. There's this, you don't give advice, you give backup. So people drop in their own inner wisdom. There's like, hey, it's already there, it's already here. How can we facilitate a space where you can start to drop your assumption about you not being able, and actually finding the place where you're able to do things. So there's a lot about this kind of dropping into states, not so much from a purely bodily state, but more like from an embodied mind state. And it's very action driven in that sense, that it's like, hey, what do I need to, or what is very alive in me right now? What is like, hey, how can I, how can I go into action about what is important to me? And can I be honest to myself what is important to me right now? And can I drop these things? And playfulness is a lot what I learned in WeFlow. My sessions are much more fun since I really learned to see that, like, I'm very sincere in my work, but not so serious anymore.
How do you bring that in specifically? How do you make your sessions more playful or allow them to be?
Well, I see the humor of certain patterns, and not the tragedy. You know, it's like, how heavy can we make it for ourselves? Or saying like, hey, what we're doing now, it's not. When I see the clients are trying to do it good, all the time, it's like, hey, what about just exploring? Or what would it be? It's like, it's about choices. It's not about finding the perfect way. and I had a couple of clients which are struggling with burnouts and feeling themselves constantly as a failure, and it's like, where is the playfulness, and where's the longing in you, not only the I have to, but I want to, transformation, and do you want to, and if not, then what is the consequence? If you don't want to, what would you like as well, and there's a kind of WeFlow has many tools for actually for organizational structures as well, a lot as well, for like a whole business organization. We when in the training we touched, like, like from the very beginning, creating clarity. Who is the one in charge? What is the purpose of things? This is the kind of world I'm not familiar with, because I'm not coming from business world, and I learned a bit of it. And there's different levels of where WeFlow can give tools for a more bringing people into flow, and in a WeFlow creativity space. It was the tools, especially which it's about creativity, which helped me, but also my workshops now. When I set up my workshop, it's like in the beginning of my first workshop, I put out my principles. People ask me, what are you doing? We would like to learn. Don't you want to give a workshop? And I started to think what I'm doing, and I started to write. I have these are like my background principles. And in my last workshops, I present them much less as a principles, but as a agreements. Hey, can we agree to try these things out, rather than this is a principle. And that's what I really WeFlow really taught me, is like this co-creation of a space together, where we constantly check in ourselves to what we agree, and taking responsibility for our experience, and explore and help and use each other as a mirror to ourselves, for personal growth, and to professional growth, spiritual growth, whatever it is. So it laid for me a big base of how I create spaces, safe spaces in that sense as well. And there's some concrete tools which you said about how much talking is. I do have clients which come where there's very little touch. My hand might be on their sternum for the whole session, because we do something about, but it's not about it. The touch is just like a little grounding of the place. It's mostly about sharing their experience verbally, and how to navigate the experience into a place of dropping assumptions about themselves, dropping assumptions about other people, owning their own experience, seeing where they limit themselves from an old belief and these things. And it's an embodied experience, because the notice, but it's not experience based on what I do with my touch to create change in the body.
That's so interesting. It sounds kind of similar to circling, the way that you're describing it, but more active or something.
Yeah, there was it. Stefan also is a circling facilitator and authentic relating facilitator. And from what I know, the emergence of WeFlow was like it came from a kind of playground lab of 20 different practitioners going together and throwing in all the tools and the knowledge, and trying to find out what is effective on many levels, like trying different tools and a set of tools, And circling is definitely a part of it, of what it is, and creating we space. And from what I know, a lot seems to be based on integral theory, uh, uh, which I'm not super familiar in. I touched it during the thing, but for me it felt no. I wasn't too drawn to it, too much to the theory of it. Um, what I can, but all of these things again, I think talking is the better is to have the experience. So if you're really interested, my recommendation for you would do there are regularly free group tasters online. So if you're really interested to what a WeFlow experience could be and what then I recommend you to inscribe one of the free events. I can email you the calendar or something. And but for me, it's a lot about empowering the other, and create space of empowering rather than doing something for the other. It's not coaching or things. It's really creating spaces of self empowerment.
Okay, I think I'm gonna give you a choice for which you would like the last question to be. I'm gonna give you two options. So one would be, what patterns and shifts have you noticed in the 20 or so years that you've been doing this, like directions that the industry itself is going, or the way that maybe tension and emotional patterns have showed up in clients over the years? That's one option. Or if you would like to talk about your teaching more, the workshops that you do, anything in that process that's been surprising or really fun for you.
No, I think I shared already a bit about what the workshops surprise. I think I'm more drawn to the first question.
Right.
Uh, what I noticed in terms of industry is a couple of things. One is that a general awareness more about trauma is coming. There's more and more awareness in society that traumas are happening and have different shapes than what was the classical image before. Than just a violent, the one. But there's a lot of silent traumas in the last few years, at least in my awareness, and I think it's not only my awareness but the collective awareness. The context of developmental traumas became much more awareness, and so there's much more trauma informants in many practices. I can see also there's really a shift in tantric communities, that space holding, the whole concept, the whole idea of consent and what people want, and possibly triggering traumas, and how might trauma look like, or how might a person being in a traumatic state look like. There's much more sensitivity for that. What I noticed as well, at least the last 10 years, that the term polyvagal really became very prominent in the field. I have connection, like Feldenkrais and Alexander techniques or whatever. They had the personal theory about bodies, and it was part of their teaching. And some of them have proven being on some parts fundamentally wrong in terms of anatomics or whatever. But now everybody talks about polyvagal and sympathetic and parasympathetic and about dorsal and ventral and all these kind of things. And even in that, um, I I see a lot of simplification up to a point of complete wrongness. Um, but it becomes like a common understanding that like, hey, there's a nervous system, and we can be calm, we can be activated, and we can be overwhelmed or something like this. um, there's more fluidity between different things, and at the same time there's an incredible increase of schools and modalities and methodologies. um, and what was really new for me, and it became actually my awareness started in, I think, around this in 2016 2017. Then things became online, like in Zoom. That is one big shift, that now facilitating, a majority of facilitating and of teaching is like not in person or in real life events, but in online thing. and obviously with the pandemic it really took a flight and it became super popular. And I mean, I'm really surprised what is possible with online and Zoom and video call. And at the same time, it was really quite clear to me that this is not what I want. I'm so into touch and one thing. So there's a certain jealousy to the people who are willing to do that, because it broadens up and it makes group work scalable to, I don't know how, I mean, I heard about events being with 1,000 or 2,000 people, which is also on an economic level seems to be very profitable. And me being only with one-on-one clients sometimes feels like, I wouldn't mind the extra cent. But if I drop into what my longing is, it's physical closeness, real life experience, and the possibility to touch and having this kind of interaction and let my hands talk. So I think this is what there was the question. No, emotional patterns, yeah, different tensional emotional patterns. Yeah, what I say, the whole concept of when I studied bodywork, it was mostly about yourself and your traumas, and now it's much more awareness about relational patterns and how that impacts us, and how things like attunement or misattunement can create a kind of pattern around. And when it was really surprising when I discovered that I had patterns around not feeling seen. I think for my parents, this whole concept would have been very abstract. Coming from a work, the whole idea, like, what do you mean you don't feel seen? It would be, yeah, it would be meaningless to them. And now there's awareness. Now this can have actually a heavy impact, like on the way how I develop and how I behave, and my pleasing patterns, or my patterns that I have to deliver before I feel accepted, or I have to make an effort to feel part of a community, and I'm not just enough for myself. I think this really, at least in my world, became much more prominent. My assumption is that this is true. It's not only true because of my own awareness, but as a general collective awareness that this is a real impact on us.
Yeah, nice. Are there any newer modalities or schools that maybe you haven't tried, but you kind of have your eye on, or they're interesting to you?
Many, many. Uh, uh, I mean, one year I heard already for 10, 15 years would really would attract me if time and time would be not a limiting resources and money as well, but mostly time. NARM, it's really because it really taps into this interconnection and attachment traumas thing. I would be very interested. I'm by a friend slash acquaintance. I got pointed to a neuroaffective touch, which also like I saw now some models from a recorded online class from a course, and she starts with from the point of view of how conceiving and up till the delivery, what already might be impact on that things. There's a certain skeptic on that for me, how far that is traceable, but there's some working models around that, how that might be ingrained into your cells and be able to be coming in contact with them, with these kind of experiences without ever being able to verbalize, but somehow sense like falling into a bottomless pit or things like this, like because these sensations I encounter regularly with clients, and this model or this theory says it's connected with this and this thing. So there's, I think that it's these modalities I'm interested to, and my other way is completely the other way. It's about I grew up, as I said, I grew up very Catholic, and for me, they in a style or the kind of message I got is was very hierarchic. God is punishing if you don't live a good life, and so for me, the words God and the religions are very loaded. And I was in an advanced circling training last October, and we were and some of the practices. John, who held the thing, was talking about God, and I felt triggered, and I brought it in the circle. I feel really triggered with this word, and you know, I said, and then he said, well, if you use the word the unknown. So yeah, I can agree to unknown. I know how I can drop into unknown. So my personal path is I'm taking speed on, okay, where is my trauma around the word religion, spirituality, God, divine. All these words I feel like a cynical emotion coming up, and for me cynical is a sign of an unresolved pain. So there's a curiosity there, what I can explore about this. I had for many years like the same cynical reaction on the word love. Somebody tell me he loves me or whatever, and I felt immediately cynical, like non-belief and things, and this is not present anymore. So I could imagine the cynical voice also gets softened out when with some more practice around what spirituality might mean for me, and if I might talk about God in a way where I feel not triggered myself, or I'm not feel triggered by other people talking about God, because I know what it could mean for myself in my own sense, without this Catholic image.
Yeah, it makes me wonder what would happen with like what clients would come to you after that, like you were saying before with the sexuality thing, and then clients started coming to you. Yeah, I wonder.
Yeah, no, I'm really curious as well. Yeah, uh, and that's and one of the questions was like how you keep it sustainable and interesting. It's this, you know, it's like learning, and there's so much more space, and every time I learn something, And sometimes I learn something with a certain client, and then this type of clients come more, and I can apply it more, or we can explore this more. So for them, I can't imagine I ever stop working. Honestly, I think I'm gonna slow down, and at one point have less clients, and stand up later in the morning and go home earlier, or these kind of things. Or but I can't imagine that right now. I can't imagine I stop working.
That's great. It gives me a lot of time to get to Amsterdam and get a session with you.
I'm curious. Yeah, well, you're welcome.
Is there
Because
anything that we've talked about today that you would like to touch back on? Anything that would bring a feeling of completeness for you in the conversation?
not specifically. I think what is really present in me somehow the question about how the vulnerability about me bringing my vulnerability uh, really brought me in touch with that, and I'm still a lot with my love for my work and my love for my clients and the people, and I just talking about it, I notice again also going into my voice, and so I want to thank you for that, and yeah, I think I feel it as a gift that what stays for me of this talk is actually connecting with my love for the people I encounter, and they I feel privileged that they come to me, and then we work together.
Oh, perfect. That's I'm very happy if that's what we accomplished in our conversation. Thank
Yeah,
you
it is.
so much, Marcus. It's really, really nice to meet you and just get to hear about your world, the thing that you're always doing for people, trying to
Mm.
enter into your world.
Yeah, I'm curious. Now you're saying this, I'm really curious if that is what happening for people. I'm wondering. I'm curious to hear if that is happening for people, or if it's happening for you anyway.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think yeah, it feels like it to me. I mean, I think it's part of my job too, is to draw you out. So I hope that I've done that.
No, definitely. Hey, thank you.
Thanks, Marcus.